Albert Wesker was born in 1960 to a pair of parents who had superior intellectual genes. As a child, he was collected alongside other children for the Umbrella Corporation, and it was here that he would receive the surname Wesker. As he got older, he would meet the creator of Umbrella, Oswald Spencer, and Spencer saw in Wesker the perfect prodigy and decided to take Wesker under his wing. In 1996, Wesker joined the newly founded STARS division of the Raccoon City Police Department, where he would work as a double agent for Umbrella, giving them information on any police investigations. During that same year, Wesker took part in the infamous Mansion incident alongside fellow STARS members Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Rebecca Chambers. While at the mansion, Wesker injected himself with an experimental virus that was created by William Burkham and allowed the tyrant creature to kill him, which would cause the virus within his body to reanimate him back to life, but would give him enhanced abilities. Over the next 13 years, Wesker would travel around the world collecting the remaining resources of Umbrella while gathering multiple different virus strands and experimental samples in his quest to create the perfect virus strand, which would allow him to purge the world and bring a new rise to a new race of superior humans. In 2009, Wesker would succeed in creating an ideal virus strand to purge the world, which he dubbed Ouroboros. However, it was during this time that Wesker would encounter his old STARS member, Chris Redfield, and his new BSAA partner, Sheva Alomar. Chris and Sheva succeeded in stopping Wesker's initial plan to drop Ouroboros into the atmosphere, thereby forcing Wesker to fuse with Ouroboros in a last attempt to kill them both. Despite this, thanks to their teamwork and a pair of rocket launchers, Chris and Sheva defeated Wesker, putting his reign of terror to an end once and for all. Although Wesker's reign had ended, that couldn't stop his legacy from living on. From the shadows of Wesker's past came Jake Muller. Jake was born in 1992 to Albert Wesker and an unknown woman who had immigrated to the United States alone in her early 20s. It has been theorized that Wesker pursued a romantic relationship during his time with Umbrella. Isn't that a bit surprising? I guess Wesker did have a heart at one time. However, it seems that this relationship didn't last long, and it seems that the woman may have ended the relationship and moved to the foreign country of Edonia without telling Wesker, not knowing that she was pregnant with his child at the time. From an early age, Jake had to support his chronologically ill mother for many years, and Jake soon found work as a mercenary in order to support his mother, selling his services to the insurgents to fight off the government. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts, Mrs. Muller passed away not long after he became a soldier for fortune. On December 24, 2012, Jake would encounter the governmental agent Sherry Birkin, who asked for his help, stating that his body carried antibodies that could be used to create a cure against the newly designed C virus. Jake agreed, but only for the sum of $50 million. However, little did Jake and Sherry know that Neo Umbrella had sent their newest experiment, dubbed the Usnek, after Jake to capture him for similar purposes. Despite Jake and Sherry's best attempts, the Usnek succeeded in capturing Jake and Sherry, and they were held for 6 months by Neo Umbrella, where Jake would learn about his father, Albert Wesker. Jake and Sherry would escape the facility only to find themselves in a secret Neo Umbrella facility, and it was here that the two would encounter the Usnek for the final time. Jake managed to defeat the Usnek in hand-to-hand combat, and with Sherry's help, he was able to shoot the Usnek through the heart, putting it down once and for all. The last we see of Jake seems to be somewhere in the Middle East, where he has made a deal with a young boy to kill all the BOWs in exchange for an apple. Hello again guys, Brian here at 3TR presenting my 9th versus series matchup. I felt this time around that I would pit two of very interesting characters from the Resident Evil franchise. However, the unique thing about this matchup is I believe that with the direction that I believe Resident Evil 7 may go, this match could actually end up happening in the future, and I just want to share my thoughts on how I think this fight would play out. So, without stalling anymore, I present the prodigy of Umbrella, Albert Wesker, against the merc for hire, Jake Muller, and we will start by comparing them physically. By the time of his death, Albert Wesker was a 50-year-old human male standing 6'3", and despite his age, Wesker was in insanely good shape and still well into his physical prime. As a result of the viral infection, Wesker was granted a number of superhuman physical abilities which range from hyper-accelerated speed and reflexes, enhanced agility, intensified endurance, increased strength, and limited healing factors. The virus also hardened Wesker's skeleton, internal organs, tissue, and skin to the point that any attempt to punch him or engage in hand-to-hand combat would most likely result in fracturing limbs on part of the attacker. Despite this, the virus giving him a series of enhanced physical advantages by the end of his life, it also turns out to be his greatest weakness. Over the years, the virus became very unstable to the point in which it led him to utilize a specialized serum to keep the virus at bay at specific intervals and had to be taken daily. The downside of this serum, however, is that if it is taken too much or used his enhanced abilities too often, it could cause his body to break down, killing him in the process. Jake Muller is a 20-year-old human male standing 6'3", and just like his father, he also was in very good physical shape. Like his father, Jake had injected himself with a sample of the newly developed C virus, but thanks to the antibodies within himself, it allowed him to gain a number of physical traits of the virus without causing any forms of mutation. Jake was given superhuman strength along with enhanced durability and stamina and reflexes. The virus also may have affected the rate in which Jake's thinking may have operated, allowing him to think on his feet and recognize certain weaknesses in his opponents. Although he is not granted an advanced healing factor like his father or Sherry Birkin, he was able to survive many battle scenarios easier than the average human could. But if he takes too much damage at one time, Jake could easily be taken down in no time. Believe it or not, this category is actually a bit tough to call. In terms of physical traits, Wesker and Jake do share a number of physical advantages. They are both equally strong, equally durable, and equal in reflexes. However, Wesker in his corner has a serious advantage of having a highly developed healing factor, body tissue, and enhanced agility, which Jake does not share. However, Wesker has the serious weakness of his virus, so if he did happen to use his enhanced abilities too much, Wesker would burn himself out much faster, and this is a weakness that Jake does not share. Despite this, I do still believe that despite his weaknesses, Wesker is overall slightly better as a physical package, and does have the advantage of developing his skills with his abilities over time, while Jake has only just recently gained his enhanced properties. At the end of the day, I feel comfortable giving Albert Wesker the slight edge over Jake Muller in physical capabilities. Before injecting himself with the prototype virus that Birkin had gave him, Wesker was a master at martial arts, and with his cold-blooded attitude, Wesker showed no signs of fear and was able to defend himself against hordes of monstrous creatures. During his time with Stars, he did spend a great deal of time training his skills as a marksman, but chose not to focus on them as much as his fellow Stars members. After Wesker's death, however, it seems that Wesker chose to downgrade his use of his martial skills and did not incorporate them much to his enhanced physical abilities, instead relying on basic punches and standard grabs. However, two of Wesker's most favorite uses of his enhanced physical abilities was his ability to move his body fast enough at any range to dodge bullets, and his ability to impale people with his hand. However, it should be noted that these abilities do take time to charge up and easily telegraph what Wesker is about to do. It's also worth noting that despite being the main antagonist of the entire Resident Evil franchise, Wesker really did not have much actual battlefield experience, unlike Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, and Leon S. Kennedy. For a majority of his life, he chose to act more like a puppet master by manipulating others to do his work for him, and only rarely chose to get his hands dirty. Jake Muller grew up as a mercenary and spent year after year from the age of 12 using his skills on the battlefield in armed and unarmed combat that was taught to him. Although Jake was a capable marksman, just like his father, he chose to specialize in hand-to-hand combat. Jake evidently was so skilled in hand-to-hand combat that he was able to string together powerful attacks quickly among multiple targets. Strangely, a number of Jake's favorite attacks, such like upward palm thrusts and downward piercing kicks, his physical strikes were so powerful that they seemed to decimate enemies quickly and even staggered the Usanak at one point. His swiftness in hand-to-hand combat has shown to be greater and stronger than Leon and Chris's, and Jake often incorporated flashy jump kicks and classic wrestling throws without getting worn out due to his increased stamina. This category is much easier to call. Despite all the skills Wesker has as a combatant and all the advantages he has with his enhanced physical abilities, it is clear that Jake is better when it comes to the skills he has at his disposal. Wesker's biggest flaw is although he has a lot of skills, none of them are particularly sharp when it comes to using them in actual combat. Because of his lifestyle, Wesker really never got a chance to use his skills much against an opponent that could challenge him on an equal level, and when he did, he chose to cut and run as he did with his encounter with Alexia in Resident Evil Veronica. Wesker even had difficulty using his skills against opponents who were physically inferior than himself, like Chris and Sheva were. While Jake has spent more time in a hole honing his skills for 8 years straight, and it would mean that Jake's skills are much more sharp. Also, Jake is better at incorporating his physical traits into his fighting styles, and therefore is much more creative with his combat skills. If Wesker had difficulty dealing with two highly trained combatants who are equally skilled in hand-to-hand combat users and as well as marksmanship, how will Wesker deal with someone who is even better in hand-to-hand combat than he is? And it's for these reasons that I have no doubt that Jake Muller has the edge in martial skills. Now, describing Wesker's battle tactics is a bit complicated because they kind of work like a coin in which there are two sides to how he operated. When engaging an opponent, Wesker relied heavily on using his enhanced abilities to close the distance and deliver a series of quick grapples and punches. He was also very good at countering up-close physical strikes and countering with strikes of his own. However, Wesker very rarely chose to charge inwards towards his opponents and chose more to walk at his own pace, allowing him to dodge gunfire rather easily, whether he could see where the shots were fired from or not. Now, the downside to his tactics is his own personal ego and how it works against him. Wesker is extremely overconfident and never really seems to take anyone seriously until it's too late. Signs of his cockiness can be seen over the course of Resident Evil 5. In one example, once Wesker had successfully dodged and closed the distance between himself, Chris, and Sheva, he successfully managed to grab and place Sheva in a hold, but instead of just breaking her neck and then engaging Chris one-on-one, he continued to talk. Another example took place just moments after that event, in which he managed to engage Chris and Sheva again, and when he once again successfully managed to separate Chris and Sheva, he used his fast reflexes to dodge Chris's gunfire and pointed a gun right in Chris's face for a good number of seconds. But instead of just shooting Chris in the head immediately, he continued to talk, allowing Sheva to provide a distraction. Even Wesker himself admitted that he should have killed Chris years ago instead of allowing Chris to live, causing him more trouble. In the short, Wesker could have become the most dangerous enemy within the entire franchise, but thanks to his overconfidence and his need to hear himself talk, this heavily downgrades him to a stereotypical comic book villain whose arrogance ended up leading to his greatest downfall. Jake Muller as a battle tactician was very much balanced with his ability to operate in any combat scenario. As a mercenary, Jake was taught that a good defense is an overwhelming offense. However, if he happened to run into an opponent who could bring even more offense against him, Jake was never afraid to retreat and fight another day. Jake was also very skilled at switching from shooting fights to close quarters fights on a dime, and was much more comfortable with engaging almost any opponent with either of these methods. In a short, Jake's skills were nothing out of the ordinary from most protagonists of the Resident Evil franchise, but what Jake had above all of them was he was much more suited to engaging opponents up close rather than keeping his distance as most other characters would prefer. As battle tacticians, Wesker and Jake are both very effective in almost any combat scenario, but unfortunately for Wesker, his ego is too much of a liability to make his combat skills deadly. Yes, Wesker could easily impale me with his hand, snap my neck like a twig, or punch me so hard that it could shatter multiple bones and seriously damage a number of my internal organs. But the problem is that Wesker is not bringing anything to this fight that a well-trained combatant couldn't deal with. You don't have to be as fast as Wesker to be able to dodge and counter his super speed strikes as Chris could, and you don't have to be as big or as strong to counter Wesker's physical strength to bring him down to the ground as Sheva could. Once you've seen Wesker's tricks once or twice, it's not hard to get around them and counter Wesker's strikes, because Wesker is not very creative with how he uses his enhanced abilities. And having inside knowledge on Wesker's skill set is something I believe Jake would have going into this fight. One must remember that in Resident Evil 6, Jake had been captured by Neo Umbrella and was held for 6 months, and Jake admitted that they had spent a lot of time talking about what Wesker could do in combat, so Jake would be fully aware of what Wesker's capabilities in combat would be. Jake himself may not be a very sophisticated tactician himself, but he is capable of using what skills he does have to maximum effect. All Jake would need to do is let Wesker's own overconfidence do half the work and take advantage of all the openings and mistakes that Wesker would certainly make. And in the end, I feel confident giving Jake Muller the edge in battle tactics. Before we jump into the final verdict, I would just like to state right now that due to the overall nature of how this fight would most likely play out, I will not be adding their armament to this particular matchup. Although Wesker does carry a pair of L-Hawk Magnums and Jake carries a single 909 handgun, I really doubt either one would be interested in using them in this particular fight. So, no edge will be given in terms of armament. Now that we got that on the way, on to the final verdict. Despite giving Jake most of the advantages in battle tactics and martial skills, with Wesker only having a very slight edge in physical capabilities, at the end of the day, I would have to say that Wesker would still win. But only barely, and only after Wesker does something that we have never seen him do before. In this fight, we would see Wesker take this fight seriously after a time and choose to go on the defensive, which again is something we have never seen Wesker do before. The only time we've ever actually seen Wesker take a situation kinda seriously was during his encounter against Alexia. In that encounter, once Wesker saw what Alexia was capable of doing, he chose to cut and run instead of staying and fighting, despite the fact that he too had enhanced abilities as well. And if Chris had not been there and that front door had been locked in that situation, then I do believe that a much more serious and defensive Wesker is exactly what we would have seen. And although Jake is much more prepared for this engagement in an offensive combat sense, Jake has to deal with Wesker's enhanced durability and rapid healing factor. So even if Jake went on a total offense, landing powerful blow after blow on Wesker, it would take Jake several hours before Wesker's serum was used up, leaving Wesker's body unable to continue fighting, causing Wesker to kill over. Wesker may be confident and cocky, but he's not dumb enough to keep trying something when he realizes it's not working. Now, to set up this fight and to give you guys a visual example of how this would play out, this fight would play out somewhat like a mix between Blade and Nomak's fight from the film adaptation of Blade 2, and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin's fight in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, with Wesker taking the parts of Blade and Obi-Wan, and Jake being Nomak and Anakin Skywalker. Let's say that this fight takes place on the launch deck of Wesker's tanker from Resident Evil 5, with all the lights on and no RPG rounds around to use. Wesker and Jake stand about 25 yards from each other. Wesker takes his daily serum right at the beginning and says to Jake, "Alright boy, this shouldn't take too long." Wesker starts off by trying to finish off Jake immediately by trying to rush to Jake's position to impale him with his hand, but Jake has anticipated this and quickly steps to the right and delivers a powerful punch to Wesker's face just as Wesker's impalement attempt fails, staggering Wesker, with Jake replying, "I don't know, old man. I think I'm going to take my time with you," knowing that it is going to take him a while to beat Wesker to death thanks to his healing factor. For the next 10 minutes, it is a constant chain of Wesker attempting to use his enhanced speed and strength to overpower Jake, but Jake would simply dodge Wesker's strikes entirely or counters Wesker's grapples and strikes with a powerful uppercut punch, powerful kicks to Wesker's midsection, and responding to Wesker with a series of his own special moves, ranging from powerful throws to unique power strikes that Wesker has never seen before. After a period of time, Wesker would stop and realize that his normal approach to this type of fight isn't working, and if he doesn't do something quickly, he's going to end up burning through his serum due to the fact that he is overusing his enhanced abilities. So, Wesker decides to change tactics completely and decides to take a defensive stance, and just wait until Jake makes a serious mistake and leaves an opening. But to do that, he has to get Jake so mad that he makes a mistake, and it is here that Wesker would turn his greatest weakness into an advantage: his mouth. And it is here that the fight would transfer into its second phase. Wesker would say some insult in an attempt to get Jake to go on a total offensive dervish like, "Your mother was a whore," or "How does it feel knowing you'll die at the hands of a superior being?" Wesker would say something around those lines, and Jake, being a 20-year-old hothead who loved his mother deeply, would completely lose it and go on a total offense, which is exactly what Wesker wants to happen. Jake would then begin pounding at Wesker, trying to break through Wesker's defenses, and although Wesker is taking some hits, for the most part he's holding his own. However, Jake manages to deliver a powerful uppercut punch, knocking Wesker into the air and landing flat on his back. Jake immediately jumps on top of Wesker and begins delivering blow after blow to Wesker's face. But what Jake doesn't notice, however, is that Wesker's right arm is holding still and begins to vibrate, as if it is charging up for something. And in a final attempt to finish off Wesker, Jake would jump straight up into the air in an attempt to flatten Wesker's skull in with his foot. But while Jake is still in midair, Wesker would immediately launch himself off the ground, and using the opening that Jake had provided by jumping straight into the air, preventing him from dodging, Wesker would insert a perfectly placed impalement with his right arm right through Jake's chest in midair, with Wesker shouting, "Gotcha!" And as the two come falling back to the ground, Jake removes his arm from Jake's lifeless body. He notices that he now holds his son's heart in his hand. And as Wesker begins to walk away from Jake's corpse, he crushes Jake's heart in the palm of his hand and disappears into the darkness. Bottom line, what this fight comes down to is that although Jake would be in a much better position to win this fight from the beginning, Wesker would be in a much better position to survive. And although using a tactic that he has never used before would feel very odd to him, it is something that he is capable of pulling off. And using his big mouth to piss off someone would most likely work on someone like Jake with his background. When fighting against Wesker, he can make a lot of mistakes and still keep fighting a losing battle for a great deal of time. But when you are fighting Wesker, you can't afford to leave any openings or make any serious mistakes, because once you do, it's all over. And that is something that I believe would happen in this fight. And it's for those reasons that I declare Albert Wesker, the prodigy of Umbrella, the winner. I hope you guys enjoyed this Versus Series matchup, and please remember that this outcome is my own personal opinion, so don't get too upset if Jake Muller just happens to be one of your favorite new Resident Evil characters. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to track me in my future videos and Versus Series matchups. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and here's a preview of my next Versus Series matchup.
There's only room for one boss and one snake.